Arizona's premier live podcast studio and online radio.
Thank you for listening to Live the Dream Media.
Does your ordinary radio feel a little limited? If you're looking for a new way to listen, it's time for a fresh start. Introducing the Live the Dream Media app, your premier destination and a new level up for digital radio. Over the last 2 years, we've found new ways to ensure your digital radio experience is the best it can possibly be. From live podcasts that spark new perspectives to a 24/7 soundtrack of live music, and even our built-in merch store. We've built a platform that is convenient, high quality, and simple to navigate. But we're only just getting started. Catch all of our shows weekly and join the Live the Dream Media family today and help us change the airwaves forever. Download it for free on the App Store or Play Store today. Live the dream. The dream starts now.
Your favorite radio just got bigger, bolder, and better connected. Live the Dream Media is revolutionizing how you stay tuned in. With our explosive growth in online radio and our brand new mobile app, your entertainment goes wherever you do. Stream your favorite shows, discover new hits, and connect with audiences across the digital landscape, all at your fingertips. Advertisers don't miss out. Join our expanding digital network and reach engaged listeners across platforms. Download the Live the Dream Media app today and experience radio reimagined.
Looking for a radio station that actually wakes you up, guys? Well, every weekday from 6 to 9 a.m., Christopher D. Simone brings you Wake Up Live, the morning show that sets the tone for your whole day. Then stay tuned for the Marana Oro Valley Experience, Southwest Flavor with Ron Arenas, The Bob Elliott Show, and so much more. Live the Dream Media is online radio packed with music, live podcasts, and shows you can only hear right here. Download the app on the App Store or Google Play. Live the Dream Media. The dream starts now.
It's termite season.
Hi, it's me.
And bugs fear the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control.
Go blue at Essential Pest Control. We'll eliminate those bugs, bees, and termites. And stop paying too much to that national provider. Buy local for great service and affordable rates. Call Essential Pest Control because termites fear the blue.
Run for your life.
Call for the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control. 886-3029. That's 886-3029. Or check online at essentialpest.com.
This is Ed Wilkinson with Wilkinson Wealth Management, where we manage money for gun owners. What does it mean to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired? It means designing a plan that allows you to do the things you want to do, outpace inflation, and never run out of money in your lifetime. If you want to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired, call me, Ed Wilkinson, at 777-1911. That's 777-1911 or WilkinsonWealthMGMT.com.
I'm proud to welcome my good friends at Tucson Iron and Metal Retail to Inside Track as an advertiser. Jamie Kipper and her staff are conservation experts. They sell round and square steel tubing, metal plate and roofing materials, as well as new and used steel, aluminum, and stainless steel to ranchers, artists, interior designers, roofers, as well as you do-it-yourselfers out there. Tucson Iron and Metal Retail is open Monday through Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to noon. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail, 701 East 36th Street. Call 520-209-1576. That's 520-209-1576. Or go to TucsonIronMetal.com. tucsonmetalretail.com. Come by and be sure to ask for Jamie. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail. This is what conservation and repurposing is all about.
Does your ordinary radio feel a little limited? If you're looking for a new way to listen, it's time for a fresh start. Introducing the Live the Dream Media app, your premier destination and a new level up for digital radio. Over the last 2 years, we've found new ways to ensure your digital radio experience is the best it can possibly be. From live podcasts that spark new perspectives to a 24/7 soundtrack of live music, and even our built-in merch store, we've built a platform that is convenient, high quality, and simple to navigate. But we're only just getting started. Catch all of our shows weekly and join the Live the Dream Media family today and help us change the airwaves forever. Download it for free on the App Store or Play Store today. Live the dream. The dream starts now.
Welcome to Inside Track with Bruce Ash and Ed Wilkinson on the Live the Dream Media Network.
Hello, everyone, and a very pleasant good morning to you, wherever you may be. Welcome to a special America at War edition of Inside Track. Bruce Ash coming to you live today from the Live the Dream Media Studios in beautiful Marana, Arizona. Ed Wilkinson is on assignment this week, and today we have the hardest working man in Pima County. Our good friend, retired U.S. Air Force General Ted Maxwell joins us for a special show today. In just a couple of minutes, we'll hear from our special guest for the first half hour of today's show, former Deputy NSC Advisor to Dick Cheney and friend of the show, Stephen Yates. Many of us have been watching his reports on Fox News and various other news platforms. Steve has been very closely aligned with the Trump administration for some time and a key player at the America First Policy Institute earlier. I first met Mr. Yates when he was the chair of the Idaho GOP and worked closely with him at the RNC, where we participated on several projects together. In the second half of today's show, Dr. Leonard Hammer, a human rights lawyer and scholar who works in the Judaic Studies Department at the University of Arizona, will chat with him about the way forward on human rights in Iran after that regime change takes place. Please join us today for the entire hour. I think you'll find it very, very great. Thanks for joining us on the Live the Dream Media app or watching us on X, Facebook, YouTube, and our other platforms. And I should tell you that the first half of today's show is brought to you by our good friend Eric Rudin from Essential Pest Control. Call Essential to keep your home or business free from all forms of insects, vermin, and weeds today at 886-3029. This week, Eric's team is protecting one of our buildings from loads of matter being dropped at the front door of one of our medical users. His crews devised a netting system to keep birds from nesting without hurting the birds at the same time. A good solution. Eric's a great guy. Also supporting Inside Track is Eb's great company, Wilkinson Wealth Management. I'm a client along with my sister, Tucson Iron and Metal Retail, and my family office company, Paul Ash Commercial Real Estate. Thanks for joining us today, Ted Maxwell.
Bruce, I always appreciate being on the show, and it's been great spending the last couple of weeks with you. You know, this may just become a habit after this. You know,
I'm all for it.
And Eb's not here, and I need to jump over on his seat, and I'm kind of like, he's going to be going, wait, you know. But I know I'm still waiting for the sound effect for the advertisement before the show's over.
So thanks for joining us today, Ted. If someone in Pima County wants to vote their RTA ballot, we're going to get to Steve in just a second. With this war business is going to have to wait just for 1 minute.
I'm looking forward to that discussion. Steve's going to bring a lot of good information.
He will. How do people get their RTA ballot to the polls at this time?
Here's the thing that they need to remember, other than please be a yes on both 418 and 419, is if you put it in the mail now, it may not get there in time due to some recent changes in USPS and how they're postmarking and loads and manpower and everything they've been going through. So really, you need to take it and drop it off. And there's a couple different ways you can do it. There's 3 locations that have drop-off and replacement ballots if you need one for some reason. And that's at the Recorder's main office, which is at 240 Stone.
Right.
You got the Recorder's Country Club office, which is 6550 South Country Club. And then there's one way out by the Ward 2 office in the city of Tucson. So all of those are in the city of Tucson.
Right.
We can talk about if that's a good idea or a bad idea later. But you can also, there's 24-hour drop-off ballot boxes, again, at the recorder's office. The two of them at their recorder's office, one up for drive-through, one up for walk up, and they're both monitored by cameras, as I've been told. Then on the east side, there's also an office drop box only in front of the Pima County Health Department. But other than that, the only other option you have is the vote mobiles, which is something new. We've talked a little bit about that. They're driving them around. Today, being the 4th of March, it will be located at the Salazar Ajo Library from 10 to 3 in Ajo. So, and then on Thursday, it will be at La Velita Community Center down in Sarita. So if you're down in Sarita and you want to still cast your ballot, you can go to the La Velita Community Center and drop it off there, again from 10 to 3. And then the last place that the vote mobile, as they're calling it, the Nanini Library, is at 7300 South North Shannon Road in Tucson. So that's way in northern Tucson over on Shannon.
So you got yes ballots? Get them in.
Please do. I know the parties have been monitoring the voting at the vote mobiles, and so far it appears that it's all going as planned. But I think there will be a lot of discussion after this election about both the signatures on the outside of the envelopes as well as how these are being collected, because honestly, some of it I really just don't like.
Yeah, I agree.
But we got bigger issues in the world.
Well, we're happy to have Steve Yates join us. Steve, can we get your pretty mug on the screen, I hope? We hope. Lots of people have speculated why America and Israel picked February 28th to launch a daylight attack to decapitate the leadership of the Iranian government. How the heck did they know, Steve Yates? And by what means did the Israelis have to take out all of the senior leaders that would be assembled there? And what are your sources telling you?
Hey, Bruce. It's a pleasure to join. I've heard a lot of different stories about how this came into the picture. The most compelling to me is that our allies in Israel had some incredible human intelligence capabilities that allowed them to be able to track the physical movements of key leaders and their loved ones. The stories range from medical treatments, dental treatments, and other things that allowed for, in addition to fixing people up, also improving our ability to track where they go. And by whatever means, human intelligence, signals intelligence, it was our allies in Israel that gave the tip, to my knowledge, that there was this meeting taking place. So we prepared for months. We cooperated and collaborated on a layered form of joint operations. The Israelis were prepared to move on the leadership targets, and Americans were prepared to move on the military and security targets. It was, I think, just the fortuitous tip that we have this preponderance of evidence that this gathering is taking place here, and you have a shot at like 4 or 5 of these top names at once. And that, I think, is what explains the timing. There's a lot of sort of silliness out there about who dragged whom in. There's literally been talking and planning for months about this. It really wasn't a question of if, it was a question of when and how. And Israel, United States, and some others, there's a lot of urging from Gulf allies. Mm-hmm. They're saying, you need to be prepared and we need something decisive, no half measures. And I think that's the correlation of circumstances that led to that timing. But I would also point to that date being my late father's birthday. And so I just considered it to be a candle on the cake saying, happy birthday, Dad.
You know, as a Jew and as I've traveled to Israel now almost 30 times over a period of my lifetime, it is almost impossible to remember, except for one other time when Israel evacuated tens of thousands of Ethiopians from that country in Operation Moses and Operation Solomon, that a operation took place on Shabbat. This was also one of those times when Israel decided to go and take on this kind of an operation on Shabbat, and on the edge of Eve of Purim, which is in part about the evil man Haman and Ahasuerus, who was up against him. So very interesting thing. I have with us today, Steve, retired Air Force General Ted Maxwell. Ted, any questions here for Steve to begin with?
No, I love the point that Steve made, though. People sometimes think that you make the decision to do something and then the plans go into place. And I think there are so many plans that the military have on the shelf for all sorts of range of decisions, because when the opportunity comes about, you've got to take it. So, so Steve, what I'd be curious about is, what are you hearing? Obviously, that was a unique opportunity with that. I know there's a secondary strike that they did on another gathering of the leaders that may have had some insight to who was there too. But when did you think that it became apparent in your mind that this was going to happen, that the negotiations weren't going well? A lot of things that the Iranians would tell the U.S. or our allies, no, we won't let you do that, were just indicators that they really weren't going to play. They were going to make promises. It doesn't mean they were going to follow through with promises.
Yeah, well, it's kind of hard to judge where that tipping point may have come for the administration and its negotiators. For me, I have lived through 25 years of them lying and making deals that don't get kept. And so I never for a moment believed these were negotiations in good faith. I supported the president in giving it the college try. I think there's strategic value in terms of the signal it sends to the American people, to others around the world, that they really did give diplomacy and peace a chance. But I think that it was about 2 weeks out. I had another friend who was in radio, and we were talking that day, and I said, I just really feel like they're going through these motions at this point. I think there's a really high chance that there's a strike coming in the next couple of weeks. Now, I would confess, I don't have a crystal ball that's 100% accurate. I thought it was going to be a strategic strike that hit hard, but maybe reset the table again to say, have you sobered up, and are you going to take negotiations seriously? I mean, Trump has really done this layered approach to pressure in a lot of different other circumstances. And I thought that would be consistent with the pattern. And I would just say that this full on go, together with, I think a tremendous joint operation with Israel. I don't think that has been noted enough. General Jack Keane of Fox News was pointing out how unique it was to have such incredibly effective jointness and compatibility with an ally. Really puts the lie to this narrative that the United States has distanced or dismissed allies. This is deep embedding and cooperation with an ally in every level of strategy and operations. And that worked beyond my wildest imagination to date.
So, Stephen, as an F-16 pilot and for almost 24 years, and then a lot of in the training world, including trading a lot of the regional partners over there. You know, I've flown with Jordanians, Kuwaitis, Iraqi, UAE pilots, all training in the F-16. You talked about our coalition and our jointness. Do you think that Iran is overplaying their cards on who they're attacking and who they're almost trying to bring into this fight with them? Because I believe a lot of those partner nations that we've worked with over in that area over the years, they're not going to just sit and let their countries be bombed either.
I agree. It's sort of a proposition that is about to be tested. In the sense, we've really changed the reality of this region. When I say we, it's really President Trump, his team, the Abraham Accords coalition. It's a fundamentally different foundation from which to engage the future of this region. It gets completely past the false hope that the left had, that you had to recognize an independent Palestinian state as the prerequisite to anything else. Then you had to give pallets full of cash to Iran and have some kind of a détente there. And only after those first two steps can you be serious about the broader Middle East. This is fundamentally different, and we did increase that training and interoperability with our Arab allies. They did improve relations with Israel and built an alternative path to peace and prosperity. It did focus on containing the malign influences and maximum pressure on Iran. That got paused a bit during the Biden administration and revived now. I strongly suspect that there was a decapitation strategy defense put in place by the leadership of Iran that said if a decapitation event comes, here are the sort of chicken with your head cut off orders of where different elements of the IRGC and other elements are to do things, because it was profoundly irrational for them to immediately lash out to potential fence sitters in the region and immediately have, say, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia say, we've had it. We're not saying we're all in on this effort inside Iran, but we are going to provide collective defense for our neighbors. And there's reports now of a missile being defeated and remnants landing in Turkey, a NATO ally. Turkey's a natural rival to Iran and others for mastery in the broader Middle East. It's sort of, again, poking others that didn't need to be poked. So I suspect this is part of what happens when you decapitate a regime like this and they don't have a coordination or control over where the remnants are doing things. And last point I'd punctuate on that I'm fearful of, but it shouldn't matter that I'm fearful of. Everyone's got to be vigilant about any kind of a mass casualty event that would be related to terrorism is another shoe that has not yet dropped, praise heaven, so far. But we don't know where things have been pre-positioned and who might take action independent of what's happening inside Iran.
Stephen, why is it that nations all around the world shuddered in fear of Iran, appeased them through diplomacy, supported them with billions of dollars, and allowed them to operate with impunity until last Saturday? And why weren't they stopped before?
It's an amazing question. It has vexed me for a very, very long time. And I have a similar vexation with regard to people sobering up about the true nature of the Chinese Communist Party, but that's a separate conversation. But there's sort of a similar pathos that is behind all of this, where we impose our rationality onto regimes that just by the DNA of their system are not like us. And you cannot impose a Western educated theological ethos onto a fascist theocratic Islamist regime. It's apples and oranges. And the same really goes to a Chinese Communist Party that is built different, is going to function and think differently. But we tried to buy them off. We thought that appeasement could work. We thought that that it's the old adage of they put their pants on one leg at a time and tie their shoes. They're just like us. And they also, I think, suffered from the globalist delusion that if we have a rules-based international order, that the tyrannical and outliers are somehow going to bend to the so-called order. And what all of these outliers do is game those systems, buy time, and then attack the people in that system. And so I think it was willful blindness, willful deafness on our part. And America was subjecting itself to that same thing, but particularly Europe, the UN, and sort of the global, I think, delusion is the reason why we went so long thinking that the invisible hand of this vision was somehow going to allow us to grow out of our problem.
You mentioned China just a moment ago. Talk about Iran's oil sales to China and China's reliance on cheap sanctioned oil from Iran. How might this impact China's economy and their energy needs? Is there sort of a side benefit to what's just happened as well?
I would put it exactly that way, Bruce. I think it's a side benefit. There's a lot of talk now that this was a grand strategic move and the real prime target was China in all of this. That may be the case. History will tell. But I strongly think that what's happened with Venezuela and Armada in this hemisphere, what's happened with Iran and Armada in that region, these were necessary steps for their own logic. But the added benefit is that China can no longer have an ample supply of discounted fuel. And I would emphasize discounted. they weren't paying market prices for these things. And so they were getting discounted fuel on which they do depend to a degree, a healthy degree. It's not a silver bullet, but it definitely would be felt. And energy markets, global markets going up also affects them. And so, and I do believe that the Trump administration does have energy security as a fundamental part of their strategy to pressure Russia and pressure China and mitigate some of their options. So I think it has that net effect. But worse than the energy effect, I think, is China watching their technology, their material proving completely worthless in a time of crisis for a major client state. In a real world, that should sober them up a bit, but I don't know that they operate under our rationality.
So this is something Ted knows a little about, is the air defenses that have been rendered inoperable, and their ability to withstand any kind of attack like the one that occurred?
Well, I think that's something that our military is focused on. You know, the fifth generation capabilities, the stealth capabilities, the small weapon capabilities. And it's a whole different story when you can control the skies. When you've got the ability to, with impunity, put your aircraft over their country, you can do most anything. And it really changes the battlefield. I don't see this one being a battlefield. You've seen Iranians attacks, and I'd love to hear this, Stephen. They've been bringing out new and new weaponry that's not unique. It's smaller. It's cheaper. It's more about the fear and the threat. But I don't think that's going to work if we can keep this coalition together. Stephen, what are your thoughts on how the Iranian battle space is going to take place?
Well, I agree that that's the direction it appears to be going. I hope that is the direction it's going, and I want my hope not to be the father of my thought in entirety. There's still possibly other kinds of unexpected developments that could pop up and that could change the way we see all of this. But for now, they, I think, are having smaller supplies, definitely not having strategic impact. And so it's really, I think our coalition has done an amazing amount of risk mitigation very effectively. And we are in as safe a position as you can be while engaging in warfare, in my estimation. And frankly, I think that we're in really days and weeks territory before some other fundamental things start to shift into post-crisis management, and maybe the political strategy starts to play out. But that's my hope. And I assess that my hope is correct for now.
Well, and I think your point is great there. And that's why I think the president went out and said, this is going to be 3 to 4 weeks. He's already laid down, this is what it's going to take in his mind to get to the point where we're really willing to talk, or you're willing to talk, or it's going to be very obvious that maybe something internally in Iran starts to take place as well. So I think that's going to be the sign. The interesting thing is something we always were concerned about. Some of the most visible things, the 3 F-15Es that got shot down in Kuwait, was due to friendly fire, because you have the overestimate of the fear on some of our partners and neighbors on what's incoming into their country that may or may not be reality. And that's always a fear. And I think we've probably gotten past that. But I do think it's going to be a 3 to 4 week effort before you start seeing anything change. And like you said, Stephen, there's stuff out there we may not know that may change in the battle space. But right now it appears to be pretty tactically oriented.
Steve, how does the world react to the statement issued by the British PM at the start of the attacks on Saturday, making it clear they had no participation with the U.S.-Israeli attack? Has the great been sucked out of Great Britain for the rest of the world?
I believe so. And not to be too crass about it, Bruce, it just reminds me of when Vice President Biden was first elected in 2008, came into office in 2009, and said his purpose was to make his office less relevant to national security. He thought that was a dig at former Vice President Dick Cheney being too influential and too powerful. But by saying it and actually doing it, it actually made it so that they're marginal. I think that the Prime Minister of Britain has made his country, his leadership, like several other critics of President Trump, look small, irrelevant, and wrong. And I think that they're going to have to try to struggle to recover. Starmer's in political deep kimchi anyway. And so we'll see what comes of that. And there seems to be a bit of awakening in Britain that I hope has some momentum. But for now, old Europe is just stuck failing Europe and looking to collaborate with China to negotiate peace with Iran, while not seeming to realize they didn't have any collaboration with China to get peace in Europe. So why would it work anywhere else?
So NATO partner Spain reacted similarly. We heard some pretty crass comments from Carney in Canada. With all the talk by NATO countries, they promised to build up their defenses. How do you think Russia looks at the fraternity and partnership of the NATO alliance today?
Well, I think it looks at core and periphery. And so if it's looking at core, and the core of NATO is the US and Germany, that's economic and strategic weight. I think Chancellor Merz went to Beijing, seemed to have seen a ghost or something, because from Beijing coming directly to Washington, he had a much more sober-minded, non-Trump derangement syndrome conversation with the president on camera, speaking directly and bluntly to other European neighbors, including Spain. And so at least saying the right things, confessing a degree of humility about we've allowed ourselves to grow weak and incapable, I think we might have turned a corner. Russia has to see that as troubling.
Steve and Ted, it's been reported on Monday, China delivered what could be a huge arms cache to Iran. What are the chances of China and Russia might get not directly but indirectly involved in this fight, supplying arms? Any thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I've got to go quick. So I'll say that if they get caught doing this, it would be the end of negotiations. The Trump summit is off to go to Beijing, and I think it would be a complete reset. But I also think in the fog of war, we have the flood of wild reporting, and so if we get evidence that this is happening, totally take that on board and recalculate. But we've got everything from the CIA working with the Kurds to take over Iran to shipments from China going in when we have complete air dominance, sea dominance. I don't know how they physically get anything in at this point.
Oh, that's a great point, Stephen.
Steve Yates, thanks for taking time. I know your time is limited today. Go talk to the next bunch of blokes who want to find out what's going on in the world. And how do people follow your work? And when are you going to write a book about all of the stuff that you've accomplished over the last 25 years or so?
Well, thank you, Bruce. I'm far too ignorant to write a book, but people can follow me on X at Yates, Steve Yates. And they can also follow me at the Heritage Foundation, where I'm a senior research fellow on national security. So look forward to continuing the conversation, and great fun and a pleasure to join you, Bruce.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, sir.
We need to pay some bills. No channel flipping after we hear from the folks who help us pay the bills here. Ted Maxwell and I will be talking with human rights lawyer, scholar Leonard Hammer, who joins us for the rest of today's show, focusing on maybe the next part of this Iran question, what the future holds for human rights in Iran. Stay tuned.
It's termite season.
Hi, it's me.
And bugs fear the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control.
Go blue at Essential Pest Control. We'll eliminate those bugs, bees, and termites. And stop paying too much to that national provider. Buy local for great service and affordable rates. Call Essential Pest Control, because termites fear the blue.
Run for your life.
Call for the blue trucks from Essential Pest Control. 886-3029. That's 886-3029. Or check online at essentialpest.com.
This is Ed Wilkinson with Wilkinson Wealth Management, where we manage money for gun owners. What does it mean to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired? It means designing a plan that allows you to do the things you want to do, outpace inflation, and never run out of money in your lifetime. If you want to retire comfortably and remain comfortably retired, call me, Ed Wilkinson, at 777-1911. That's 777-1911, or WilkinsonWealthMGMT.com.
I'm proud to welcome my good friends at Tucson Iron and Metal Retail to Inside Track as an advertiser. Jamie Kipper and her staff are conservation experts. They sell round and square steel tubing, metal plate and roofing materials, as well as new and used steel, aluminum, and stainless steel to ranchers, artists, interior designers, roofers, as well as you do-it-yourselfers out there. Tucson Iron and Metal Retail is open Monday through Fridays, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., and Saturdays, 8 a.m. to noon. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail, 701 East 36th Street. Call 520-209-1576. That's 520-209-1576, or go to TucsonIronRetail.com. Come by and be sure to ask for Jamie. Tucson Iron and Steel Retail. This is what conservation and repurposing is all about.
Does your ordinary radio feel a little limited? If you're looking for a new way to listen, it's time for a fresh start. Introducing the Live the Dream Media app, your premier destination and a new level up for digital radio. Over the last 2 years, we've found new ways to ensure your digital radio experience is the best it can possibly be. From live podcasts that spark new perspectives to a 24/7 soundtrack of live music, and even our built-in merch store, we've built a platform that is convenient, high quality, and simple to navigate. But we're only just getting started. Catch all of our shows weekly and join the Live the Dream Media family today and help us change the airwaves forever. Download it for free on the App Store or Play Store today. Live the dream. The dream starts now.
Welcome back to Inside Track with Bruce Ash on the Live the Dream Media Network. Now back to our show.
Welcome back to Inside Track. This portion of the show brought to you by Ebb's great company, Wilkinson Wealth Management, who also helps my family. He can help you also. Wilkinson Wealth Management. Let Ebb guide you and your family. Call him today at 777-1911. I want to let Ted just have a few words before we get to Dr. Hammer, and fire away, Ed.
Well, it was a great interview with Steve Yates, but I just did want to follow a little bit up on the NATO alliance and what they did and haven't they are doing now, or some of the comments that were made. Is if you go back to the first Gulf War, when Iraq invaded Kuwait and we went over there, every nation in NATO took kind of a different posture towards that war. Mm-hmm. Some were side by side. Some they wouldn't send their military, but they'd support in troops, or they'd support some humanitarian. I mean, not troops but with some weapons or with humanitarian ways. They'd give us other forms of participation. Some didn't participate at all in that first Gulf War. So really, that may have been the beginning of where we get into conflicts outside of Europe-centric conflicts. You're going to see different NATO nations take different postures and positions. And what we heard was people going, "Oh, we weren't part of that. We weren't part of this." So you've got governmental officials saying we didn't have anything to do with that. That's, to me, kind of stepping back. Where we'll be in trouble in NATO is when we start having people say things are wrong.
Right.
That's where it becomes. I haven't heard any of those countries yet come out and say the U.S. and Israel now it's going to be a whole coalition of Gulf partners. And if we start seeing them say we're wrong, we're on the side of Iran, that's when NATO falls apart. Up to that point, I think it's going to stay pretty.
So let me change
together.
this just a little before we get to Leonard Hammer. It's a political issue here in the United States with the Democrats and Republicans. There's midterm elections coming up in November. How likely is it that the president is going to need to be stopping short because he's afraid of what might happen in the midterms? And why is it so important to push ahead and do the right thing? Because it seems like we've always almost got to Baghdad and didn't get there.
I think the people, I was a big supporter after the first Gulf War. We should have gone all the way to Baghdad. Now, I was just a punk major, in the military, captain in the military at the time, they weren't going to consult me at all. But I didn't understand that, because you had Norman Schwarzkopf saying, we've got to go all the way. If we're going to eventually have to take out Saddam Hussein.
Right.
Because this problem's not going to stop. Now's the time. And I think that's what you're seeing now. We've dealt with the Iranian populace, and not the populace, but the government, 2 rulers in 45 years, 2. And it's not just a little rule over there. Yes, they have a president. He doesn't really get any say. It all goes through the Ayatollah. That's who it went. That's the way it's set up. We've had 2, and they've been a pain to not only us, but to the region. Don't forget, Iran and Iraq were at war for a long time.
Right.
Hezbollah, all there's so many things that are linked to the Iranian government. At this point, while the statements are we're not going in for regime change, we're not going to go set up, we're not going to go become the pseudo facto government controlling party for the next decades. I think if we don't continue this until there is some kind of change of the leadership, we're making a mistake. We're going to be doing it again in 10 years.
You're probably right. Our next guest is a name you may not be familiar with, but Dr. Leonard Hammer is a human rights lawyer and a scholar who is part of the Judaic Studies program at the University of Arizona. Welcome to Inside Track, Dr. Hammer. Are you with us? There he is.
I sure am.
Nice.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm joined, as you just heard, with retired U.S. Air Force General Ted Maxwell. We've been discussing military operations in the Middle East. Before we get to the human rights aspects of this developing story, tell us about your background and what led to your career in human rights as a lawyer and elsewise.
For sure, yeah. So I have a background more academic, so not on the ground per se, although I am Israeli, so I am familiar with being on the ground and engaging in battles. But more of studying international human rights and a focus on freedom of religion and belief and conscience, as well as on cultural heritage, memory, things like that. And a strong focus actually on dealing with post-regime changes, meaning I worked for the Open Society Foundation as an international expert for about 10 years, dealing with integrating, I should say, constitutional changes, particularly with regard to human rights, integrating human rights programming into academia in the former USSR countries, ranging from Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, all the way over to obviously to Russia, Ukraine, and everything in between, Georgia, places like that. So, not that I'm an expert, but I certainly have thought about these things and seen the changes for better or for worse.
So we know what's happened here in Iran for the last 4.5 days or so. What changes might be around the corner in that country when the shooting ends?
Right. Yeah. So, it's interesting, and I hope you don't mind the point that was made before by your esteemed guest, and I don't mean any disrespect. I mean that as a point of discussion, is to really think about what does it mean to have regime change, and what does it mean to actually conduct that and engage that, right? I mean, that's really hard to do.
Right.
And we're talking about a huge country, right? 90 million plus. Plus, I'm for the regime change. I wish it would happen overnight, but it's not going to be. We have to be realistic here. We're talking about 3+ generations of individuals who've been schooled and educated and working in the context of an Islamic revolutionary regime. I mean, for lack of a better term, and it was that. I mean, it was brutal and it was harsh, and it was telling these kids and these people, this is the reality and this is your life. And we're not dealing with the expats who are living overseas for the past 30, 40 or whatever it is. I guess a bit more actually. I guess 40 plus, right?
Plus.
Right? Yeah. And they've been schooled in Western democratic ideals, and probably partially the elites from the Shah as well, right? So they were the upper level people, which is fine. But we're talking about really trying to, if we really want to take this from the human rights level and from an idea of what do the people want, that's not to say we should throw it out there, but we should be aware of what's really happening, what has happened, I should say, to the people on the ground for the past 40 some odd. And I think that's important to take into account. I could keep on going unless you had another question of direction.
Well, I've got a little follow-up, Mr. Hammer, because I think you're right. The regime change is not going to occur overnight. It's 45 years of living under this, and which is for probably many in the country, it's not an impact on their day-to-day life. It's a large country, 90 million people. What we see videos of all the time here in the U.S. is the urban core, is the universe. You don't see the rest of the country. So how do you think that plays into this kind of change as well?
Right. No, great. And, it reminds me so much. I spent time living in Turkey as well, and I saw the AKP with Erdogan rise up in the early part of this century, latter part of the previous beginning of this. And it was the same idea of saying, as well, how could that happen? Go to Istanbul. It's the most cosmopolitan, coolest place on earth. And then you go out to the outer reaches, and there's like poverty rife, and so it's the same idea. Not the same idea, but you could understand how there's these distinctions that we see in the West and what we see in the reality. Look, I mean, there's also something to take into account here. The sanctions, I know people didn't like them, but they were kind of effective, sadly, to the common person. In other words, the elites, I don't think will be that affected, or they probably were at a certain level. But the sanctions really did take hold. So you're talking about a people really living in economic strife, in a really bad position. In other words, they're kind of open, I wouldn't say rife for it, because that would be manipulative, but they're kind of open to say, well, we can start thinking about a different type of future. And what I mean by that is to say it's going to be very hard to throw out the Islamic overlay in Iran, right? Because the Islamic Revolution, I mean, they had ideals and they imposed them in a really radical way. It was a revolution, and the idea of the ummah, of the nation, in Hebrew would be am, Those are powerful notions that people in the outskirts, if you will, really take to heart, and that's the way they rile up themselves and their peoples. And I see that in the backyard by Hamas and Hezbollah, what they do. What I'm trying to say is that yet these individuals are actually rife for engagement to say well, we have a capacity to allow for I'm going to say a more stable reality existence for you. And I'm saying that particularly with regard to the ethnic minorities, right? Because they're quaking in their boots, and I'm sure the Kurds are thinking, separatism or some form of federalist state, which I understand as well. I mean, they've been subject to oppression for years and years, and a viable package can be, and I kind of saw this from, I think it was the Constitutional Party, the former Shah's son. Was kind of asserting this, although I'm a bit dubious of placing him in power for a variety of different reasons. But what I'm just saying is, allowing for platforms to emerge where people can engage and discuss, and that's, of course, human rights discourse. I can't help myself, but allow for ways in which people can be engaged and say, look, we can now establish something that can be really positive for you, and it doesn't. Yes, it can, and I have to assert, it can still maintain the Islamic overlay. There's no reason to throw out the baby with the bathwater, if you will. And for a lot of these people, that's their identity, and that's how they want to live. But it doesn't have to be so oppressive and so damaging. And just one other thing, just to add on to that. Sorry, I don't mean to talk too much, but just to add on to that. It's part of the problem that we saw, for example, in Iraq, as you mentioned, and also in Syria, right, where this pan-Arab nationalism fell apart. And then you had these ruling dictators who emerged with this crazy strong fist and acting against particularly minorities, like the Homs in Syria, for example, like terrible stuff, but relying on these former ideals, Arab nationalism and unity and all these different things, which are nice, but they were kind of fake, right? They just were used as mouthpieces to maintain their own power. And that's kind of what I'm nervous about here in Iran, that somebody will emerge and say, we still have to have this Islamic revolution, which doesn't really exist anymore. Sorry, I don't mean to talk too much, but I just wanted to add on that point of the danger.
Fascinating. You're on the right trail here. So as a learned observer in this space for some time, Leonard, what do you expect the population of Iran desires their country to look like in the near-term future from a human rights standpoint?
Yeah, you're asking what do I think? What do I? I didn't hear.
Yeah. What do you looks like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I personally, I'll tell you something. I've been in touch with universities there, academic, right? I even published a paper there in Mofid University. They have a human rights center, believe it or not. It's really quite interesting. I'm sorry to deviate, but I just want to offer like a perspective, insight into how they think. So, when you say human rights, and I was like, this is so cool. They have a human rights center in Mofid University, which is outside of the main center, and it's so obviously it's top down controlled of what they can say and such, but they have their perception of human rights in a good way emanates from a religious context and what you can learn from the Quran and things like that, which is fine, right? You can really learn beautiful things from religion in many ways, right? So I guess what I'm saying is that when we think about a context of human rights and freedoms and stuff like that, it's going to be very different as to how a person on the street outside of Tehran, let's say, or outside of some of the major cities, really understands what human rights is. And that's, in a way, that's good, actually, because it affords avenues by which you can go in and say, look, this is what can be done here, right? So if you ask me, what do I see as it's scary for me because it's almost unavoidable that there will be some, because of the context of where they are, some top-down leader or some top-down ruler who will say, this is what it is, right? These are what human rights are. This is what your freedoms are. And if it's not done properly, it can be done very dangerously, right? It can turn into a very dangerous type of weapon or a tool or utensil that can be utilized against the people. And that's, I guess you get what I'm getting at, is that I'm concerned with installation of somebody in power without allowing for some type of checks, and I'll call it American terms, checks and balances that would be stabilizing rather than destabilizing. So I mean, I don't have a complete answer for you because I actually think that a lot of the people don't perceive actually or understand what human rights can be. I really believe that because they don't think like that. They haven't thought like that.
So Ted and Dr. We, in America, in Europe, in lots of other parts of the world that had a Western sort of a slant to them, human rights means, sort of similar to what we have here in America. But is it realistic for anybody here in America or in Europe or in parts of East Asia to assume that what human rights is going to look like in a place like Iran, who is for 47 years been in this middle of an Islamic revolutionary sort of a movement?
And let's not overplay that. Even under the previous, the Shah, it was very, very controlled. Now it may have looked more Western. There were more suits and
mini skirts, and high heels.
That was the exact same thing that happened to Iran. I mean, to Iraq. Iraq was one of the most westernized countries until, in order to maintain power, it became more convenient to rely on this religion. I mean, the Islamic or the Iranian National Guard didn't really exist before the first Gulf War, and then it grew. So I think that's my concern, Mr. Hammer, is that something's going to have to fill that void. And obviously, from an American perspective, you mentioned it, checks and balances. We'd like to see a multi-divisional system of government, something that we've tried to have put into place in Iraq, and it's still can struggle at times. But the question will they fall back to what they know? And the people in the outskirts really don't care. They just want to be allowed to do what they live their life, how they're living it, and how they want to. Freedom to them, human rights is just let me live my life, not I need all these freedoms and these rights to vote and rights to other things. They don't care.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And economic prosperity, right? Economic stability. They just want to have food on the table, be able to do what they've been doing probably for 4 or 5 or 10 generations, and it might just be working their family field, right? You're 100% right. It's really quite basic in many ways. I mean, I don't mean to belittle them at all. I'm just saying that it's a reality. And by the way, another point, Beirut as well, right? Think about Lebanon. Your point goes along the same lines, and you're 100% right. The Shah, I mean, he was great for the West and good for Israel too, I might add. But he ruled really in a harsh way in many ways. It might be carrot and stick, might be what's good here. In other words, and if there is, and I don't mean to say is that I think it's going to be really hard for America and along with Israel to go in and create and instill a regime change. Oh my gosh, that will take manpower. That will be. I mean, we saw what happened in Afghanistan, and it's hard to compare these places. I understand, but it's similar in some ways. But I guess I hear what you're saying. I'm just trying to envision what it can be, where the power would emanate from. And yes, it would be from the power centers, meaning, the capital and the larger cities and stuff like that, Combs and places like that where they had, but I just would be really cautious, myself personally. I'd be really cautious of allowing in some of the old guard, but not necessarily throwing out some of the old guard's ideas, right? Because it did shape the country, right? And the shape of the country is what's, you kind of have to maintain a little bit, to kind of like clay, and then kind of play with it to shape it back to or where you want it to go. So that's just my feeling. I also hear what you're saying between the lines, and I kind of agree with this, a form of some type of federalist type of power, type of structure. I mean, which probably would serve Iran well in many ways, because people then would feel comfortable, right? They feel, yeah.
So let me back to reality. 90 million people, very much larger than Iraq. After that whole thing happened there, much larger than Lebanon, larger than Syria, lots and lots of different tribal interests, as well as national interests, or wanting to have national recognition, the Kurds for one. How does all that happen? I mean, it just seems, and maybe I'm making too much of this, but it just seems that this is almost a Herculean sort of a task that's in front of us, or in front of that country and the rest of the world. In America, we were mostly Englishmen. There were a few Scots, some Irish, some Dutch and German who showed up here, a few Jews that came from Spain, maybe. But there was sort of a commonality, and there was sort of a homogeneity. This is not what it is in Iran. I mean, it's a very diverse sort of a culture with all of these different factions. How does a federalist sort of a setup, and I like the idea, but we're Americans. It took us long enough, with all of the people being so homogeneous, for us really to put things together in this country and make it. How difficult is this going to be?
Yeah, so there's one saving grace, not saving grace, but one idea that we should remember, and that is, this is Persia, right? We view it as an Arab country, but it's not. It's a Persian country, and it's a very strong culture, actually.
Great point.
Yeah, they're very proud of their past history, as they should be. It was actually quite rich and quite beautiful, and they are, during the Persian rule, if you will, and at two times in history, they offered beautiful things to the world, and through Islam, pre-Islam and after Islam. Actually, it's really interesting if you look at some during the revolutionary rule, they changed what Koresh and all the previous pre-Islam, they made them into Islamic figures. It's really funny to watch how they altered history in a crazy way. But the Persian culture is really strong and beautiful, and there's a lot there that can actually bind. That's why a federal system or federal notion might work here. One other thing to say, and then I'll hear from everybody else. I don't mean to dominate. Look at al-Shara in Syria, right? There's an individual who he was a radical guy. I mean, he was part of Al-Qaeda. Let's be real here. But he's a pragmatist and he's smart. And what he did is, at least hopefully what he's still doing, I know it's a bit dodgy. I see what's happening there, and it's not so simple. But at least he hasn't gone crazy and killing people who are ethnic minorities and things a little bit, but not to the extent that, let's say, for example, Saddam Hussein was doing. The point, or Assad even, the point is that, finding that pragmatist, finding that individual who can rise in from the ranks, who doesn't want to necessarily dominate and recognize it. I think there are people like that. You're talking about, I still have hopes, and obviously you meet a lot of expats, Iranians, and they're like, wow, this is like talking to your contemporary, right? They're almost like you in a way of how they grew up and where they came from. I actually think there's a lot of people like that in Iran, and I think they're very proud of their past and their culture, in a way that they do want to have a binding kind of milieu, for lack of a better term, of themselves and of their country. Anyway, that's just something to think about.
Well, and I think that's one of the big points, the whole fact that it's a Persian country. It's very clear, having, again, in my military experience, worked with folks, it was very clear it's the Gulf of Arabia. It's not the Persian Gulf, you know, because we were returned, as Americans, we were calling it the Persian Gulf, deploy into the country. They're going, no, this is the Gulf of Arabia. It is a different culture. That's why I think they overplayed their ideas that they were going to get all these other Gulf nations that were going to come in. No, a lot of them don't like the Persians.
Right.
So to the point of federalism, we established a federal republic. And that's something that's different than, I think, a federalist government inside of a country that exists. We just talk to our state representatives. The federal government has the power because the states, as individuals, give it to them. What we're talking about in Iran is a federal government that comes over and takes care of the stuff federal in nature. And the rest of them, just like, you know, the Khobar Towers, which I spent many years in Saudi Arabia, were put up to bring the Bedouins out of the desert. And guess what? The Bedouins came, looked at it, and said, we're out. And those towers remained empty because they wanted to live. They were happy. They didn't care what was going on with the government, as long as they could live the lifestyle they wanted to live. And I think you've got that opportunity in Iran. And I do believe if the right people step up, and that was a great point, somebody who maybe, yes, is looking for some power, but doesn't have to thrive just on the power and total control.
Oh, we're going to find out if there's a Mahmoud Washington roaming around looking for something to do in Iran and bring back Persia. Leonard Hammer, thank you so much for joining us. This, you know, after talking with Steve Yates, you know, on the operational side, this was a fascinating way to really complete the hour. And I thank you very much for coming on the show. I'm so happy.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, that's all the time we have today, so we'll need to leave things there for now. Thanks so much for your visit today. And Ted, I appreciate you stepping in. You're, like I said, you're the hardest working man in Pima County.
This was a great show. Bruce, this was a great show. Two different sides to the same issue and two different insights. And I thought it was great.
All right. We're out of time and we'll need to run. Thanks so much for joining us today. Many thanks to Ted Maxwell for his participation today. One last blurb from you on RTA, real quick, 30 seconds.
You have to drop your mail. You have to drop your ballots off. And I'm asking you, yes, because it's going to be a difference maker.
CC, before we close, remember to stroke our friend Christy Simone a check to help him fund his campaign for Oro Valley Town Council, D. Simone for Oro Valley. Thanks for joining us today on Inside Track. Hope you enjoyed today's show. Tune in next week when we have special March Madness show planned for you, talking about Larry Bird, the hick from French Lick. For Eb Wilkinson, until then, this is Bruce Ash and
Ted Maxwell.
See you again in 167 hours.
Thanks, Bruce.